Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
I'm Chris Gorski.
And today is July 18th. Please turn to page 52 in your magazines. Today we're going to hear part one of a two-part article on a book that is very close to Chris's heart.
Absolutely. We're talking about life lessons in The Little Prince. Let me say right now, this is my favorite book, which is a little different than your opinion, right, Karen?
I don't really dislike it, but I just don't have the kind of feeling that you have about it. I have other favorite books. For this one, somehow it just didn't quite hit me in the same way, but that's okay. I'm willing to hear about it because I don't understand it well enough, and I'm willing to learn more about it.
I think that's actually really good because rather than two people just saying how much we love this great book, we have two different perspectives, and that's really valuable.
That's right. Well, let's see where it takes us. Our title again is Life Lessons in The Little Prince, and here we go with paragraph 1. The Little Prince is a timeless children's book written by French author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It was first published during World War II and has since sold over 140 million copies. In the book, Saint-Exupéry, a former pilot, draws upon his life experiences to teach lessons about love, loss, friendship, and loneliness.
The book is told through the eyes of an airplane pilot who crashes his plane in the desert. Suddenly, a small boy with blonde, curly hair appears. The boy explains that he's a prince from a tiny planet called B612 or B612. The prince took care of everything on his planet. He even fell in love with a beautiful rose. Then, one day, the rose lied to him, which made him doubt the sincerity of her love. The boy became so unhappy and lonely that he decided to explore the universe to feel better. The prince visited many planets and had wonderful adventures. His journeys made him realize that adults are very strange. They are obsessed with buying things and can't stop worrying about what other people think about them. To the prince, these things are a waste of time.
After their conversation, the prince helps the pilot find water to survive. They walk to a nearby well and enjoy the cool water. Soon after, the little prince decides to return home because he misses the rose. He tells the pilot to look up at the night sky and remember the prince's laugh if he ever misses him. A few moments later, the prince is bitten by a snake and falls to the ground. The next day, the pilot returns to the spot, but the body is mysteriously gone. The reader must decide whether the prince has passed away or magically returned to his own planet. So this one is kind of full of mystery. We don't really know what happens there. It's kind of like a fable.
Yeah, I think so. In many ways, this book has, it pulls from a lot of different styles of books. You can look at this almost like mythology. Is there a religious aspect? Is the Little Prince a little bit like Jesus, where he returns after he's done with his work here? And there's a lot of animals that represent different ideas.
All right, let's go back to our title, which is Life Lessons in The Little Prince. The Little Prince is very, very popular, I think, all over the world because you can find it really easily in stores here and often in bilingual editions. So if you're having trouble with the original language, which is actually French, often they publish it here in English, you can often also find a Chinese parallel translation. And life lessons are things that we learn to help us do better in life, not to overreact when something doesn't go well, and so forth and so on. How to live life to the fullest and not get so easily frustrated by things in life. Note that it is a compound. Life is a noun, lessons is a noun, so lessons is not stressed. We don't say life lessons, we say life lessons. First sentence, The Little Prince is a timeless children's book written by French author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Now, who in the world wants to try and read that name correctly? Now, Chris and I both have a confession to make. We've known this book for decades, But neither of us was that sure how to pronounce the author's name, so we had to go online and find out. The hard part of it is Exupéry. That X there is kind of confusing.
For me, the real difficult part of it, too, was that we have 4 different parts of his name. I'm often used to saying a person's first and last name, 2 words. With Chinese names, you might say 3 names, but this part has the Antoine, Toussaint, and then the Exupéry.
Which is hard to read.
And it's very hard, especially for a person without any French experience like myself.
And that is true of, I would say, the average native speaker of English, because we do not, in general, do a lot with foreign language education in the U.S. or Canada or England. It's most of the English-speaking world because everybody needs to learn English, so we're not as conscientious about learning languages. Okay, so our first sentence is, it's just telling you that it's a timeless children's book. So what does it mean by timeless?
So timeless is almost like the word iconic, where it becomes so famous that even if you don't like this book or you have never read it, it's still famous. Think of some of the most famous singers or artists in your culture. Even if you have never seen their movies or seen their art, you still know their name. You still know what they do. It's timeless. It will always be famous. Or we could also say iconic. I-C-O-N-I-C, iconic.
Means you see it and you know right away what it is and what it's about. And it's something that never goes out of fashion. So some things may be popular for a while. People go crazy about them. One of them was Portuguese custard tarts. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
Portuguese custard tarts. People just went absolutely crazy over them for a while. And suddenly, although you can still buy them, nobody talks about them anymore.
Yeah, they're not so popular today.
Right, so I wouldn't call them timeless. But this book, I knew about it since I was a very young child, and I still see it around today. It's still very popular. Okay, and as for French names, in the past, it might have been hard to pronounce them if you hadn't had French training. But now with the internet, all you have to do is spell it out into Google and then type in pronunciation. You will probably be taken to a YouTube video that is read by a native speaker of French, and then you can play it over several times and learn it. So that is one really amazing thing about this age that we're living in. Information is all at your fingertips. It was first published during World War II and has since sold over 140 million copies.
The Little Prince actually still sells almost 2 million copies every single year. This book is just incredibly popular.
Wouldn't you like to write a book like that?
I know I wouldn't have to work anymore.
Right. 2 million copies every year?
In fact, it's one of the most widely read and most widely translated books in the world. It's often used as a basic book for students that are beginning to become a little more advanced. One of the first books you can read in the French language will be The Little Prince. And this book's easy to read and easy to translate style makes it really appropriate for protecting rare languages. In fact, in 2005, it was translated into a language from Argentina in South America called Toba. Now, what's really special about this is that there is only one other book translated into the Toba language, the Bible.
Oh my goodness. So if you want some reading material and you're an Aborigine, you're one of the original inhabitants of Argentina and you speak Toba, you don't have much choice, but at least you have something modern.
You have The Little Prince and the Bible.
The Bible.
That's it.
That's amazing. Let's move on. Oh, when was World War II? I wonder if everybody knows.
Sure. So depending on where you're from, World War II started in either 1938 or 1939, and it ended in August of 1945.
Right. But things were starting to go pretty bad in around 1933.
Absolutely. Things had been cooking since pretty much right after the end of World War I. The first shots in Asia, we traditionally in history date around 1938 if you're thinking about the Pacific War.
Okay, our next sentence. In the book, Saint-Exupéry, a former pilot, draws upon his life experiences to teach lessons about love, loss, friendship, and loneliness. Now, for all of the things that we spend time learning and studying and reading about, in the end, I think these are the things we care about most.
Saint-Exupéry was known as a really great pilot, but he didn't fly really modern planes. He's one of those guys that flew planes that didn't have a lot of tools in them, that you needed to have a good feeling for the plane before you could even really land it properly.
Do you know what picture I have in my mind right now?
What's this?
Snoopy with his goggles.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's like the World War I type of planes.
Yeah.
You are absolutely correct. Snoopy in like the Red Baron, those bi-wing planes, those are the kind of planes that Exupéry was fluent in. But he wasn't that good of a pilot in many ways. So, yeah, actually, when he disappeared in 1944, he was much too large for the plane he was flying.
Oh, he himself, his body.
Yeah, his body was too large for the planes he often flew. He didn't speak English. He spoke very poor English, so he couldn't speak with the command centers at airports.
That's scary. I mean, that's against the law now. Now you have to be able to know aviators' English.
And he often confused the difference between feet and meters.
Oh, my goodness. That's a difference of 3, a factor of 3.
He was a terrible pilot, but he was not afraid of anything, which was probably what made him so famous early on.
Which is actually a bad combination.
Well, he did disappear in World War II, probably for those reasons.
And it's funny that you say his body was too large for the plane, because when we see Little Prince, we expect the author to be kind of small and diminutive, too.
He absolutely was not.
Oh, no.
He loved his gin and tonics. He loved smoking and drinking coffee. He was a man that loved to enjoy his life, and his body showed that.
And to indulge his appetites.
Everything he wanted. There was no when you look at The Little Prince, it's about enjoying the simple pleasures of childhood. And I think in many ways, he didn't like adults that tried to control these things. And he lived his life very much like a child in some ways.
That's so interesting. I didn't know any of this. And this gives me a new perspective on the entire book.
The book really reflects his life. The more you learn about his life, the more you recognize The Little Prince is his life.
Now it makes more sense to me. I think part of my problem before is I couldn't relate it to what was really going on. Why did the author write these things in that way? Slowly now, maybe I may come to appreciate it more.
Let's find out more.
Next paragraph.
The book is told through the eyes of an airplane pilot who crashes his plane in the desert.
Now, according to what you said, there is a reason for this. Now, why does this happen? Because Chris was saying he was not a great pilot.
Well, you're exactly right. So he did crash his plane in the desert. He was trying to win a contest flying from Paris, France to Saigon, Vietnam.
Oh.
But in 1935, he crashed his plane outside of Cairo, Egypt. He was stranded for almost a week without water. These planes didn't have enough space for food and water and supplies. He almost died. And this is the story of The Little Prince.
I'm sorry. Now this is making so much more sense to me.
It's almost an autobiography, this book.
Okay. Now, I'm really glad we're doing this, because otherwise I would have always had these questions about what the heck is, or where is the author coming from in this book?
One character we'll talk about later is the fox. And the fox is actually inspired from his real life. While he was stuck in the desert, there was what's called a fennec fox. It has these huge ears and these beautiful eyes. You can take out your smartphone and look. Fennec fox is Fennec. And the fennec fox is very good at finding water in the desert.
Oh.
And when he saw the fennec fox, he knew there had to be some water nearby, and it gave him hope. And this is why the fox in The Little Prince is so wise.
How did he happen to know that?
He was just a man of just like going out and adventuring. He reminds me of like Steve Irwin. If you guys remember the old crocodile hunter from about 10 years ago. He just loved nature and life and adventures, and that's just what he knew about fennec foxes.
My goodness, that was good luck. Okay, next sentence.
Suddenly, a small boy with blonde, curly hair appears.
Now, I don't know where that comes from. Why? But of course, if he's French, he's going to expect to find a white person because these days we are so touchy about race and we want to have representatives of a lot of different kinds of people in all works. And I thought, oh, we're in trouble. Here's a little blonde boy.
Well, actually, this also comes from his life. And so he had a brother who died at 15, and he had short, blonde, curly hair.
Boy.
And the language he uses we'll talk about later. But the little prince looked a lot like his brother who died.
Okay, it makes more and more sense the more you talk about it. So suddenly somebody appears, and this is what he is. And it sounds like a very cute character.
The boy explains that he's a prince from a tiny planet called B612. I've always said 612. I've seen people say B612. You could say this how you want, I think.
Does this possibly come from the name of a plane? Because when I was in first grade, the male classmates all knew about B-52 bombers. And I go, where did they pick that up? I'm not interested in bombers, but I just picked it up listening to the boys in the class.
Well, Antoine Saint-Exupéry disappeared before we had real B-52 bombers.
Oh.
Right. But you are correct. This is from a plane. His plane. The plane he used to fly was the A612. The little prince lived on B612. Karen, you're learning so quickly.
I really am. So that's sort of it's another level of plane. It's the one after. It wasn't his own. It was a sister plane, we could say. Okay, next sentence.
The little prince took care of everything on his planet. And this was easy because his planet was tiny.
There's a lesson in that, right? Don't live in a big house. It's very hard to clean. Okay, I think that's pretty clear. Let's move on.
He even fell in love with a beautiful rose.
Now, this sounds like a tale of thwarted love to me.
Yeah, so the rose is a beautiful flower with thorns that, we say they protect the flower, but honestly, it's pretty easy not to get hurt by the thorn. And the thorn honestly represents his wife, who was this beautiful flower in his mind, who had a very sharp tongue. She was quite rude, but she was also very soft and beautiful. And they often fought, a lot like the little prince did and the rose.
Okay, that makes more sense too, and that often happens. And I used a word here that's worth learning. I said it sounds like a tale of thwarted love. Thwart is a kind of uncommon word. We do use it sometimes. It's spelled Thwart. He thwarted my plans. That means he frustrated them. So a tale of thwarted love means a tale of love where things did not work out well. The love really did not develop into a really good relationship. Okay, so we'll move on from there. Then
one day, the rose lied to him, which made him doubt the sincerity of her love. It made the little prince think, does she really love me?
Now, that one seemed pretty transparent to me. It sounded like something from a relationship where the other person really betrayed him somehow. Because once a person has lied once to you barefacedly, they've just told you a lie, and of course it's true. Why do you doubt me? Once that's happened once, you can never believe anything they say after that.
Antoine de Saint-Exupéry was no angel himself. Like I said earlier, he loved his food and his wine, his cigarettes and his coffee, and he also loved other women.
I was going to say, if you're continuing along that line, that list of stuff, usually what happens is if you're indulging your appetites, it's going to be other women.
When the little prince is walking around when he visits Earth, he comes across a rose garden, and he says, these roses are as beautiful as the one I have back home. This kind of represented the other women that he often had relationships with outside of his marriage.
As a female, I hear this same old story, leave the jerk, is what I think. That's what I think most women will think. That's how they will react. Okay, so she lied to him. But, this is another interesting thing. We humans often remember forever. If somebody has done something wrong to us, we remember it all our lives and we are resentful. We hold it against them. We often forget about the unkind things we have done to other people.
To be fair, for Exupéry, he recognized his flaws. He did understand that this was a wrong thing to do, and he would often go back to her. That doesn't make what he did correct, but at least he did understand that this was causing pain and was a big reason that his rose would use her thorns against him. Our next sentence says, the boy became so unhappy and lonely that he decided to explore the universe to feel better.
Okay, so he had some unhappiness where he was. So he went out and wanted to explore the world and to see if there was maybe a happier place for him.
The prince visited many planets and had wonderful adventures.
Okay, and that's pretty straightforward. So he did try out some other places and he had some good experiences.
He met a lot of strange adults that made him question why adults are the way they are. And these are just Exupéry looking at people and thinking they are strange. Let's continue. His journeys made him realize that adults are very strange. They are obsessed with buying things and can't stop worrying about what other people think about them.
And that is really true. We all have that problem. Yes, adults are very strange. We humans are all very strange. And sometimes we get our values mixed up. We care more about things than people, and we keep worrying what other people think about us. That's pretty counterproductive.
To the prince, these things are a waste of time.
And that's pretty straightforward. Last paragraph. After their conversation, the prince helps the pilot find water to survive. And that's also pretty straightforward. Next sentence. They walk to a nearby well and enjoy the cool water. A well is a place where you get water. We don't hear so much about them these days. Soon after, the little prince decides to return home because he misses the rose. And that's his wife, where he has some problems with her, but he goes back. He tells the pilot to look up at the night sky and remember the prince's laugh if he ever misses him. Now, a laugh is a good way to remember people. And about me personally, if I'm outside sometimes, people say, Karen. And I look at them and I think, how do you know me? It's because they heard me on the radio. They recognize my laugh. Okay, next sentence. A few moments later, the prince is bitten by a snake and falls to the ground.
So, like I said earlier, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry had a brother that died when he was 15. And this was really hard on him because he was next to his brother when he died.
Oh, my gosh.
And when his brother died, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry later wrote that, quote, he did not cry out. He fell as gently as a young tree falls. Now, if you are very familiar with the book, you will recognize that the language he used to describe his brother dying was the same language he used to describe the little prince when he died.
Oh, so the symbolism is pretty clear.
Very clear.
The next day, the pilot returns to the spot, but the body is mysteriously gone.
This is where people start to wonder, is this book is the little prince like Jesus? I don't personally think so. But some people do look at it that way.
It's just because that symbolism is so prominent in our minds. Right. And finally, the reader must decide whether the prince has passed away or magically returned to his own planet.
Now, we are running out of time for today, but we will be back tomorrow with the second part of our Little Prince story, where we will learn more about that fennec fox. We will learn about the most important lines, at least for me in this book. And what did Walt Disney think about the Little Prince?
That's a heck of a lot of teasers. Now, I'm looking forward to getting a quite new perspective on this book that I didn't really understand very well before. So make sure you tune in tomorrow to hear the rest of Life Lessons in the Little Prince.